Welcome back to The Different Knock. In the past couple of years, I've been teaching English to Italian people. Paid, to be clear. And one of my favourite parts is trying to explain English idioms to confused Italian mums. Phrases like beat around the bush, through thick and thin, and under the weather. And my favourite one is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Originating in German poetry, apparently, it's just such a weird idea. But somehow, as idioms tend to, it creates a lovely bit of imagery that perfectly surmises what you're trying to say in less words. Essentially, try not to do away with the things that you do need when you're getting rid of the things that you don't. More on that later. Let's talk Arsenal. We're 3 points off first in the Premier League. At time of recording, we're top of our Champions League group. But for some reason, with the VAR mistakes, injuries, Ange's weird headmaster act he's doing now, which I analysed for TDK members, check it out, the media going after Arteta, everything feels a little down. For me, anyway. That Newcastle loss, especially in the manner that it happened, felt particularly painful. I was really angry at the way we performed, and I started to think about how unlikely the title felt. I went straight to bed that night feeling pretty sorry for myself. You could argue, you're a loser. Stop letting football affect you so much. But it does. So why is that? Why is it that it took one defeat to make me, and maybe you, feel so down about our chances this year? Well, I think I needed to take a step back. Pep Guardiola's Man City, in my opinion, are the best team we've ever seen in the Premier League. Choose whichever iteration you like, the treble winners, the Centurions. Personally, I like the Sterling and Sane era. Take your pick, but I think one of those is the best. If you disagree, that's fair, but I imagine if you do, you'll be saying a Sir Alex United team, maybe the treble winners as a counter. It's really hard to compare across eras as so much has changed in football, but one of my justifications is that Pep has come in and won at what is, in my view, inarguably the most competitive time in the Premier League's history. To win, and win well, at this point in time is miraculous. And I want to put some numbers to that point to prove it. Since the Premier League's inception in 1992, which is when football started, by the way, I want to show you the total points tally for each team who won the league for every decade. In the 90s, we went as high as 91, but United also won it with 75 points at one stage, which seems mental now. And it averages out at 83.75 points to win the league that decade. In the 2000s, it averages out at 87.8 points scored on average to win the league, including a high of 95 for Chelsea in Mourinho's first season, and of course our invincible season. But there's still points tallies here of 80 and 83 in the early years for United. And then there's the 2010s. Despite that freak Leicester season pulling it down slightly, and another rogue 80-point win from United early on in 10-11, the average goes up again to 90.2 points on average needed to win the league last decade. If you're interested, so far this decade, it's working out at about the same, just below at 89.3. Pep Guardiola came in for the 16-17 season, and since then has won every Premier League he's contested, bar 2. And for most of that time, he's been up against one of the best Liverpool teams we've ever seen, and I'd argue the best. In fact, in Pep's career, he has lost 3 senior titles he's contested as a manager out of 14. 3 wins in 4 with Barcelona, with 1 loss to a record-breaking 100-point Madrid side, 3-3 with Bayern, then 5 out of 7 with City. The 2 losses were first-year teething issues, and then Klopp's COVID Warriors, who won every game from August to the end of February, bar 1. And they lost it on a leap year, so it doesn't count. Everyone has money, especially now, and especially in the Premier League, so I don't think we can just put it down to that. And I'm not saying Pep alone makes the league the most competitive in the world, of course, but he is the pace setter. To come back to it, with 5 and 7 compared to 13 in 21, which ignores Sir Alex's time before the Premier League, by the way, because let's be clear, football didn't exist. Pep's done it at an objectively harder time to win the league. The only thing he doesn't have over Sir Alex, in my view, is longevity, but I don't think we'll ever see managers reign for 20 plus years again. Pep has the record for most Premier League points in a season, the equal record for wins and home wins in a season, the outright record for away wins in a season, the record for most consecutive Premier League away wins, most goals scored in a season, best goal difference, biggest title winning margin, on and on and on and on. I think collectively, we need to take a moment to really appreciate what is going on here. We are witnessing greatness. Outside of Arsenal, this era of football, we are witnessing, in my view, the greatest manager in the history of the game, certainly in England, and he is at the peak of his powers. Pep is the Messi of managers, and only once he leaves management will it be possible to look back on everything he's achieved, the way he's affected the game, his impact on individuals, the cultures he's created, the managers he's shaped, the changes in the way football's played, and so much more, that we will truly be able to acknowledge that. At the moment, he's the funny man with the funny voice. But I promise in 20 years, we'll think very differently about him. And the reason I mention all of that is this context is so important when coming to assess Arsenal and the perceived successes or failures of other teams in the Premier League who are expected to compete with this guy year in, year out. I think the reason that losses, VAR mistakes, injuries all feel so kind of cataclysmic at the minute is because of who we're up against. We know we don't have any margin for error. So when we do make errors, and specifically when we have errors outside of our control that go against us, it feels especially depressing. We don't need any more obstacles. We have the biggest one ever up the road in Manchester. We know our mistakes will be punished. It's inevitable. Pep has set the bar so high, any moment of weakness, and we're done. Okay, so what do we do with all that? Do we just give up? Accept that Pep is the GOAT? There's nothing we can do? No, of course not. But what we don't do is throw the baby out with the bathwater. See, I told you I was coming back to it. I almost think we need to develop a new skill. As fans who, if you're far enough into this video, you're probably more engaged than, let's say, the casual fan. We have to separate out what is realistic for the club to improve upon, which is a lot at the minute, while keeping the core of what we've been doing well, the baby, and deciphering what are our subconscious standards we only have because of Pep that aren't realistic. Standards like we can't lose games and anything less than a title means failure. That's the bathwater. Some of the frustration is right to be put on the players and the manager. There's a lot of things we're not getting right at the minute, and I think the team can do a lot better in a number of things. I'm finding our lack of central access incredibly frustrating. I'm not sure the players are enjoying their football at the minute, and some of the numbers this season don't look good at all. But we also need to accept that we have a coach who is competing with the guy with the numbers from earlier. If we don't beat him and we accept that, it's not excusing failure, it's accepting that Michael Jordan is going to be the NBA MVP. So if you're Magic Johnson or Charles Barkley not getting it, you've not failed. Now the problem with saying all this is the immediate response is, oh, you're accepting failure. You're accepting mediocrity, you don't want to win, you're just saying we shouldn't even try. Quite the opposite. You try to compete, you go toe-to-toe as much as you can. You make the right signings, you control what you can control, but in the end, if you don't beat him, you don't rip it up and start again. When you hear that data earlier, you can't just ignore it. You have to start looking at what success looks like for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta in this era, and how we can best position ourselves for when Pep leaves as well. Success, for us, is understanding where we are, working on our weaknesses, but not ripping it all up if it doesn't work. Because look who we're up against. And ripping up was close to where I was on Saturday. This coach has us the closest we've ever been. Get rid of the bathwater, not the baby. The original German poetry where don't throw the baby out with the bathwater comes from is actually a satirical treatise by a guy called Thomas Murner, not Müller, essentially mocking stupid people. Now, tempted as I am to make this about how people are stupid and they don't think or whatever, it's not that. People just have different viewpoints on football. Mine isn't the correct one. We've all just got different ones. But keeping in mind what Pep is doing, if you're watching this and thinking it would be a failure to lose to that coach, maybe you and I need a rethink. If you like The Different Knock and want to see more, you can access our bonus content on Patreon and YouTube memberships for just £3 a month.